In this series of 4x4 action and adventure, we travel off-road across Australia, from south to north, with the Gulf and Desert Extreme expeditions. And we take in the world's toughest 4x4 competition, the Outback Challenge. We start with Gulf Extreme.
Hi folks, I'm Ron Moon, editor of Larger 4x4 Australia magazine, and we're starting another legendary Outback Products expedition here in Birdsville. Now back in the 1880s, this was a fairly remote town, you gotta say, but this pub, built in 1882, would have seen Augustus Pepple and his men come through. Pepple had been tasked by the South Australian government to mark the border up to Haddon's Corner, and then from Haddon's Corner across to what we know as Pepple's Corner, and then push north along the Northern Territory of South Australia as it was, and mark the Queensland Northern Territory border. It was a hell of a task, and it took a number of years. But Pepple was a pretty tough man, and we're going to follow that route through the desert up to the Gulf of Carpentaria.
We headed out from the Birdsville pub where the convoy had assembled the day before. Every car was loaded with food and water, and our fuel tanks were full to the brim. Initially, the road was pretty good, though the cars did spread out because of the dust we were kicking up. We were going due west to the most significant state corner site of Federation, and we knew that the good road would not last. Big Red, the first dune you hit in the Simpson Desert when you're coming this way. We all stopped to admire the view and to let air out of our tyres. We'd be running in sand for days to come, so we dropped from normal road pressures to about 15 psi. Now you've got to remember that tyre makers get pretty nervous about running on low pressures because at speed for extended periods, this will fatigue the tyre. But to get through soft stuff, dropping pressures will help you get through safely with less damage. The first few cars made it to the top without much trouble, but as the sand got chopped up, it became more difficult. If you're following other vehicles in these sorts of conditions, it's good to vary your line slightly to stay out of the deep tracks. But sometimes that's easier said than done. And on dunes like this, make sure the car in front of you is all the way up. You might have to back down for another crack at it.
Keep them straight, keep them straight.
It wasn't too long before we were all over Big Red, but there is a lot more dunes just like it between us and the Gulf. We continued west, following the QAA line, a seismic survey line pushed through in the 1960s. It's dead straight and runs parallel to the Queensland-South Australian border, all the way to the Northern Territory. Although we were driving in sand, the undulations were pretty severe and things inside the cars were really getting shaken about. The track was straightforward. But the rough going meant we weren't making very good time, and it didn't look like we'd be spending the night at Pebbles Corner like we'd planned. The Simpson Desert is in the heart of the driest part of Australia, and its dunes can be up to 500 kilometres long. Charles Sturt was the first European to see the area in 1845, and the desert had several different names until 1929, when geologist Cecil Madigan named it after his patron Alan Simpson, the president of the Royal Geographic Society in Adelaide. About a month before we came through this part of the Simpson Desert, there'd been some good rain, and there were patches of green and wildflowers dotted around. The moguls and undulations continued to get worse, and Macca and Karen in the food truck were feeling it more than the rest of us. Their vehicle was carrying a very heavy load, as well as towing a T-van. In the late afternoon, while we still had light, we decided to make camp near a dry lake bed where there was plenty of firewood available. Debrief on what we've done today and what's going to happen tomorrow. So, a little bit of a shakedown run today, in more ways than one. So if you've got anything that's bouncing around loose in the truck or looks like it's going to be loose in the truck, tighten it down because tomorrow gets rougher, okay? Water, guys, Macca will call the shots as far as bringing water into camp, as in 40 or 50 litres, but on a personal basis, really watch your water intake out here in the desert over the next few days. Try and drink at least a litre a day. While you're cruising along in a car, have a water bottle or whatever it takes, because you'll get dehydrated out here quite easily. Next morning, we headed south along another shot line.